OLED makes Dell's already excellent XPS 15 even better. That's it. That's all you need to know. I've seen dozens of OLED screens over the last decade, and probably even a little longer, and they never fail to impress me. They always look bolder and have excellent contrast compared to typical LCDs. Black levels on an OLED, you just can't beat that. They're just inky black. So take that screen technology together with the latest chips from NVIDIA and Intel, and you've got a surefire ultraportable powerhouse. Now, if you remember our review of last year's XPS 15, you'll definitely have a hard time figuring out what's new with this model. The big difference is that there's a 3.5K OLED screen, which just wasn't an option before. The big star of this laptop is definitely that display. The 15.6-inch screen just kind of dominates everything. It also has some of the thinnest screen bezels around, so it kind of just looks like it's floating on air. And for me, the big draw this year is that OLED, but you've got other screen options too. There's a 4K plus LCD, as well as a 1080p plus LCD. The plus there just means they have a few more pixels to basically fit a 16:10 aspect ratio. While I'm clearly partial to what OLED is bringing to this model, pretty much any of the screens on the XPS 15 are going to look really good. They all support Dolby Vision HDR. The LCDs can go all the way up to 500 nits of brightness. The OLED is actually a little bit lower. It goes up to 400 nits, but the added contrast there, OLED's ability to just turn completely off to give you really, really dark blacks, I think kind of makes up for that. It's also the better screen technology for artists and creators who care about color accuracy because the OLED supports the full DCI P3 color gamut, whereas the LCDs don't. I'll admit I'm mainly reviewing the XPS 15 to just gawk at this OLED screen. As soon as I powered it up, I headed over and checked out the Matrix Resurrections trailer in 4K HDR, and it just looks fantastic. It's not as good as my 4K OLED TV, but I didn't quite expect it to be. It's just not as bright as that, but it still looks really good, and it shows off what OLED just does very well. Those bright elements like the sunlight and explosions look fantastic and almost kind of leap off the screen. And the dark levels, especially for night scenes and when you're looking at matrix code, just looks fantastic in inky black. And what I really love about OLED screens is their ability to kind of juggle both of those things at once, which I think is going to be really important in a movie like The Matrix Resurrections. And from what I can tell, the XPS 15 screen really handles that well. To push the XPS 15's display all the way to the max, I checked out a few scenes from Ang Lee's Gemini Man, which is one of the few movies out there that you can watch in 4K, HDR, and at 60 FPS. He's doing some really cool stuff there. Now, say what you will about the movie itself, I think it still makes a really cool home theater demo, and for a screen like this, it just really shows off what OLED can do. It has a really bright color palette, a fast movement at 60 FPS, shows off like how smoothly a display like this can look. And to be honest, I was leaning in really close to these Gemini Man sequences, and the scene where older Will Smith is fighting his younger clone on motorcycles in a really great chase and shootout. It just looks really immersive. It made me feel like I was watching it in the theater again. And sure, this 3.5K OLED isn't fully 4K, but 4K content is still going to look good. It's definitely a step up from a 1080p or a 1440p screen. And another bonus with the XPS 15, those upward firing speakers sound pretty fantastic, much better than what you find on most laptops in this size. Outside of video, the XPS 15's OLED screen made looking at just about everything fantastic. I'd never have as much fun scrolling through text-heavy websites as I do when I'm looking at an OLED screen, and this one still looked very good. Text looks very crisp, and when you're looking at photos or anything just really colorful, you really get a sense that the image is just popping off the screen, which I never really get with an LCD screen. OLED just feels more immediate and vibrant to me. The DCI P3 color range is also 25% wider than the traditional sRGB range, so everything you're looking at, even photos that you know really well, will have just more depth to them, which I could really tell on this XPS. The only way the XPS 15 screen could look better is if it took a cue from gaming laptops and offered higher refresh rates. That's not really something we're seeing on productivity machines at this point, but I would love to see an OLED screen at 120 Hz in this case. That would just make scrolling and moving around the OS look a lot smoother. That's something I'd love to see eventually. Our XPS 15 review unit was powered by an 8-core Intel i7-11800H processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a 45-watt version of NVIDIA's RTX 3050 Ti GPU. That's on the low end of that GPU's potential power usage. It can go all the way up to 80 watts, but that just means it's far less capable than the same card in a gaming notebook. Still, it should be a huge upgrade from last year's GTX 1650 Ti. In the GPU-focused Geekbench 5 compute benchmark, for example, the XPS 15 reached around 6,000 points higher than last year. I can't imagine too many people will be looking at the XPS 15 when it comes to gaming, not when you can get actual gaming notebooks that have more power for around the same price range. But it can still do a bit of Overwatch. I was able to play in 1440p plus at the ultra graphics settings, which still looks really good, at around 70 FPS. And for, you know, an occasional match here and there, say you're working somewhere and you just want to get some gaming out there, that's more than good enough. The XPS 15 also tackled the PC Mark 10 benchmark around 50% better than the last model, and that's a big leap I'd attribute both to the CPU and the GPU bump here. Performance is going to be good. You can definitely feel safe throwing heavy workloads at it. I was able to transcode a 4K video file into 1080p in around 35 seconds, whereas it took a little longer last year. As for the XPS 15's keyboard and trackpad, they're still among the best you can get in a PC these days. The keyboard is very just nicely laid out. It's very wide. Typing feels very good too and very responsive. I would like to see more key depth eventually. Dell has kind of gone back and forth on that. They are experimenting with Cherry MX mechanical keyboards on their Alienware laptops now, so maybe eventually we'll see some of that on the XPS line. That would be nice. And the trackpad is very large, it's very smooth, and I don't really have any complaints there. I'd love to see Dell add in more than 3 USB-C ports eventually, but at least 2 of those support Thunderbolt 4, which means you can plug in really fast accessories. And I'll give any laptop that includes a full-size SD card reader extra points, so good job there, Dell. Another thing I appreciated, the OLED screen didn't actually ding the battery life too much. I got around 9 hours and 55 minutes in our benchmark, and last year's model got 10 hours and 10 minutes, so not a huge dip there. It's still going to be good for you, to last most of a workday. The only potential downside of the XPS 15 is that Dell was a little slow to add OLED to this model. Remember, they told us about it back at CES in 2019, and since then we've seen other PC makers like Asus really be quick at throwing OLED into their machines. The XPS 15 feels like it's coming a little late, and maybe I expected it during last year's redesign. It could just be that the pandemic slowed Dell down when it comes to putting the screen in there, but it's definitely nice to see it now. It just feels maybe like they're a little late to the party. The new XPS 15 starts at $1,300 with a Core i5 processor, integrated graphics, and 8 GB of RAM. You'd have to shell out $2,000 to nab our review unit though, which includes a 512 GB SSD. Those are reasonable prices for 15-inch workhorse machines, especially when the 60-inch MacBook Pro is still priced high at $2,400 with an aging 9th gen Intel chip. Honestly, I didn't really expect Dell to do much with the XPS 15 after last year's redesign, but the addition of OLED goes a long way. It's one of the best screens you can get right now, and it turns this laptop into almost the perfect 15-inch ultra-portable. Stay tuned to Engadget.com for more of our laptop reviews, and if you dug this video, please be sure to like and subscribe.